quarterbacks. Josh McCown, QB, New York Jets 34% owned each week. McCown is on this list. He has at least 2 touchdowns in his last 5 games. It's not always pretty on Thursday night in Week 9, he only threw for 140 yards. However, fantasy owners needing a quarterback because their starter is on a bye or because they lost Jameis Winston for Week 10, McCown is a viable option. The Jets face Tampa Bay, who has given up the 7th most points to opposing quarterbacks. Jacoby Brissett, QB, Indianapolis Colts 24% owned. The problem with Brissett is that he struggles in tough matchups. In Week 7 against Jacksonville, he threw for 200 yards and no touchdowns. In Week 10, the Colts faced the Steelers. The Steelers allow the 3rd fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. While the matchup is tough, Brissett did throw for more than 300 yards and 2 touchdowns in Week 9. It's possible he continues on a hot streak, but Brissett is a desperation option for fantasy owners. Running backs. Damien Williams, Air Bay, Miami Dolphins 33% owned. Week 9 showed an even split between Williams and Kenyon Drake, however, it seems that the former is the better option in PPR formats. Williams had 6 receptions for 47 yards and a touchdown against Oakland. He's listed as the number 1 running back, but in reality, those honors go to Drake, who is over 50% owned, but still available in about half of Yahoo leagues. Both backs should be owned and will have RB23 value moving forward. Danny Woodhead, Air Bay, Baltimore Ravens 27% owned. Woodhead is still on injured reserve, but he is eligible to return in Week 11. Fantasy owners will likely be looking for him after next week's game, so this is an opportunity to get a leg up on the competition. He's going to take over as the receiving back in the Ravens offense, which is bad news for Buck Allen. While he is still injury-prone and at risk for a setback, Woodhead is worth adding in PPR leagues. Rex Burkhead, Air Bay, New England Patriots 8% owned. Before the Week 9 bye, Burkhead had 7 receptions for 68 yards in Week 8. He's slowly carving out a role as on passing downs. With Chris Hogan possibly missing this week, Burkhead should see more targets heading his way. It's a gamble to grab him when waivers run, but he is someone to keep an eye on leading up to the weekend. If Hogan is out, Burkhead is a worthwhile RB3 in PPR formats. Wide receivers. Josh Gordon, WR, Cleveland Browns 35% owned in deep leagues. Gordon is worth a stash. He was just reinstated by the NFL and is eligible to play in Week 13. If a team is basically a sure thing for the playoffs, Gordon is worth adding. He hasn't played or practiced since 2014, so it's not clear how well he'll perform, but based on how he looked in 13, he's worth a spot at the end of the bench. Robert Woods, WR, Los Angeles Rams 34% owned with at least 4 receptions in the past 4 games. Woods is a WR3 with upside once again for Week 10. He had 4 receptions for 70 yards and 2 touchdowns in Week 9 against a terrible Giants defense. He gets the Texans in Week 10, who just allowed T.Y. Hilton to have 175 yards and 2 touchdowns, and in Week 8 allowed 2 Seattle receivers to each finish with more than 100 yards. D.D. Westbrook, WR, Jacksonville Jaguars 28% owned. Fantasy owners who were hoping to have Westbrook for Week 9 missed out as he was not activated yet. However, it is likely that he will be active for Week 10. The team wanted him to get in more practice time before activating him. He may not be a fantasy option in his first week back if the Jaguars are going to limit his snaps, but he should help fantasy owners down the stretch. Corey Coleman, WR, Cleveland Browns 12% owned. With no one else really leading the passing attack, Coleman is needed back on the Browns offense. He is eligible to return following hand surgery in Week 11. Now is the time to pick him up and stash him at the end of the roster. He had 5 receptions for 53 yards and a touchdown in Week 1. While the Browns offense isn't exactly on fire, Coleman will try to ignite that spark. Curtis Samuel, WR, Carolina Panthers 9% owned. The Panthers traded away Kelvin Benjamin and are in need of someone to step up in the passing game. Everyone has seen what Devin Funchess can do, and the Panthers want to see more of Samuel. His receptions have gone up over the past 3 weeks and the team is getting him more involved in the offense. While he's not a must-own or must-start, he is worth adding in leagues that start 3 WRs. Tight ends Greg Olsen, Tay, Carolina Panthers 50% owned. The Panthers play the Dolphins in Week 10, have a bye in Week 11, and then Olsen is eligible to return. It's unclear if he will be back in Week 12, but fantasy owners should try to pick him up wherever possible. He's going to be a great addition for the late-season playoff push and beyond. Julius Thomas, Tay, Miami Dolphins 15% owned. It was interesting to see how the Dolphins' offense changed without Jay Ajayi. One of the guys that stepped up was Thomas. He had 8 targets in Week 9 and caught 6 of them for 84 yards and a touchdown. The Carolina Panthers are a tough matchup against tight ends, so Thomas isn't a great option for Week 10, but with his role increasing, he has TE2 value. Defense/special teams DST Green Bay Packers 45% owned. The DST streamer of the week is the Packers, who face the Chicago Bears in Week 10. The Bears give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing DSTs. This is an offense that so far has not been capable of putting up a lot of points or yards and is prone to turnovers. The Green Bay DST isn't a great unit to start, but for a Week 10 fill-in, it's worth taking a flyer on.